top stories tonight. A Japan Airlines flight catches fire upon landing at Haneda Airport after colliding with a Japanese Coast Guard plane. Government looks to open more border checkpoints round the clock. And a strong quake in western Japan kills 48 people and causes severe damage to property and infrastructure. A Japan Airlines plane burst into flames as it touched down at Haneda Airport in Tokyo. The aircraft left a blazing trail on the runway before it came to halt. Firefighters tried to douse the flames with some initial success, but very soon the whole aircraft was engulfed in flames by an inferno which was raging out of control. Emergency escape slides of the aircraft could be seen deployed, and initial reports suggest that all 379 people on board managed to evacuate. The fire gutted the whole plane, and soon the metal structure of the aircraft was visible. Fierce heat snapped the aircraft into two as the aft section collapsed onto the tarmac. All efforts to douse the fire and bring it under control were in vain. Japan Airlines Flight 516 had departed from New Chitose Airport in Sapporo on the island of Hokkaido, but reportedly collided with a Japanese Coast Guard plane before landing. Japanese media reported that one person on board the Coast Guard plane escaped, while 5 others remain unaccounted for. Airport Authority Hong Kong said 5 flights departing from the city to Haneda have been cancelled.
Security outside the West Kowloon Magistracy remained tight as the national security trial of media mogul Jimmy Lai resumed after the Christmas break. The founder of the now-defunct Apple Daily is alleged of conspiring to collude with foreign forces and conspiring to publish seditious materials. The 76-year-old has formally entered a not guilty plea for 2 conspiracy charges of collusion with foreign forces and 1 charge of sedition. Prosecutor Anthony Chow said in the opening statement that Lai was a radical political figure and had conspired with Apple Daily executives and Stand With Hong Kong Fight for Freedom, or SWHK, to collude with foreign forces during the 2019 social unrest. Chow pointed out that among the 161 articles alleged of sedition, 31 of which were published after the national security law was implemented. He said during the prosecution period that spanned between April 1st and June 24, 2019, Apple Daily had published over 78 million copies. But the publication had turned even more influential by rolling out English coverage since May 2020, and more than 1 million copies were printed when it ran its final printed publication. Chow pointed out that before the national security law was implemented, Lai had urged the United States to sanction Hong Kong and China in many of his interviews, and had met with officials in Washington, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The prosecution revealed that it will call on 5 accomplice witnesses, all former Apple Daily executives, to testify against Lai to prove that he was the mastermind of the alleged conspiracies. Before the opening arguments of the prosecution this morning, the defense argued that the prosecution period for the charge over seditious publications should only begin on June 14, 2019. But the 3 judges on the panel rejected their bid, saying that the ruling earlier has already concluded that the seditious offenses were committed between April 1st and June 24th of that year. Janice Low, Cable News. Over 227,000 tourists flocked to Hong Kong on New Year's Eve, setting the highest single-day record for the year. However, many of the mainland revelers were stranded in the city after the countdown and fireworks display, as cross-boundary coaches were in short supply, and train services from Lo Wu and the Lok Ma Chau spur line to the border checkpoints were not operating overnight.
但當日呢，最長呢就係需要4個小時。
Transport Minister Lam Sai-hung explained, due to the high number of vehicles crossing the border during the early hours of yesterday, it took 4 hours, 2 hours more than the usual time for cross-boundary coaches to return to the urban areas.
以加強統籌協調各相關部門同埋業界。
In a bid to remedy the situation, Chief Secretary Eric Chan announced that ahead of hosting any large-scale events in the city, he will chair a task force to ensure the smooth coordination of the cross-border travel arrangements. Authorities will also review the enhancement of local traffic arrangements and extend the operating hours of cross-border checkpoints, especially those on railway lines during holidays, he added. Janice Low, Cable News.
A 58-year-old worker died after he was found unconscious in the control room of a gantry crane at Container Terminal 4 in Kwaichong this morning. Police were alerted about the incident at around 8 a.m. by co-workers. The crane operator, surnamed Lee, was rescued by firefighters from a cabin which was 20 feet above the ground. He was immediately rushed to Princess Margaret Hospital but was pronounced dead an hour later. An autopsy will be performed to determine the cause of death. A male passerby was injured after being knocked down by a taxi in Yau Ma Tei. The 25-year-old victim was crossing Jordan Road around 7:45 a.m. when he was hit by the vehicle heading along Woodman Road towards Tai Kok Choi. After being hit by the front bumper, the victim crashed into the windshield of the vehicle before falling on the road. He was taken to Queen Elizabeth Hospital for treatment. Police arrested the taxi driver for causing grievous bodily harm and dangerous driving. Chairman of Property Management Services Authority, Dr. James Wong, hopes the government can offer support for the implementation of the solid waste charging scheme, which takes effect from April 1st. He suggested that the authorities should give out designated rubbish bags for free during the first 6 months after the scheme is implemented. He also urged the government to put the rubbish bags on sale for people to buy them to be better prepared. Placing rubbish bag vending machines in residential areas was a convenient way of doing it, he added.
The leader of South Korea's main opposition party, Lee Jae-myung, was hospitalized after being stabbed in the neck during a visit to the southern port city of Busan. Lee, who heads the Democratic Party of Korea, is a serving member of the National Assembly and was touring the site for a proposed airport in the city when the attack happened. Police subdued the attacker at the scene and recovered a knife-like object. The motive for the attack is not known yet. Lee narrowly lost a tight presidential race to Yoon Suk-yeol in 2022. President Yoon condemned the attack, saying it was an unacceptable act. South Korea's next parliamentary elections are slated for April. Travelers heading from Hong Kong to destinations in Japan were not deterred by the several earthquakes which struck various parts of the country yesterday, killing 48 people and causing widespread damage to property and infrastructure. Check-in counters at the airport for flights departing to Japan were busy as some Hong Kongers could not avoid the trip. I'm not worried, I'll take the risk. I have business to do in Japan, said this man. A 7.6 magnitude tremor off the coast of Ishikawa Prefecture in western Japan yesterday damaged many buildings and triggered tsunami warnings. The waves were not that big, but still ended up pushing a lot of debris inland, and many structures by the coast were damaged. Several aftershocks of smaller magnitude have been felt in many places, sending residents scrambling to relief shelters. The severe damage to transport infrastructure is hampering rescue efforts and making access difficult. The military has dispatched 1,000 soldiers to disaster zones for assistance. The death toll is likely to rise in the coming days once rescue efforts gather pace. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said widespread damage was reported from many areas on the western coast. But all tsunami warnings had been cancelled as of this morning, he added. Sachin Katpi, Cable News. China's factory activity expanded at a quicker pace in December, with stronger gains in output and new orders. The Caixin Global Manufacturing PMI rose to 50.8 at the end of 2023 from 50.7 in November, marking the fastest expansion in more than 6 months and surpassing analyst forecasts of 50.4. Data from the Caixin PMI, however, did not match with official figures released on Sunday, which suggested that manufacturing activity on the mainland contracted for a third straight month in December. The Purchasing Managers Index fell to 49 in December from 49.4 in November, as factories struggled with weak demand.
Hong Kong stocks dropped on the first trading day of the year after reports showed manufacturing activity on the mainland contracted for a third straight month and home sales of the nation's top developers slumped. The Hang Seng Index slumped 1.5% today to slip below the 17,000-point mark. The benchmark lost nearly 14% last year. Alibaba Group dropped 1.2% after the e-commerce giant was ordered to pay $140 million to rival JD.com by a Beijing court after losing an antitrust lawsuit. Longfor Group sank 7% after sales tumbled 35% from a year earlier last month.